Hello, I'm Catherine Johnson, and I'm here in my very messy office to talk about Journey to Freedom, which Barrington Stoker Publishing, with a lovely cover by Katie Hickey. It's very beautiful. It's probably my favourite cover, actually. And it's the story of Olaudah Equiano, who lived in the 18th century. He was born in West Africa. We don't know exactly. We think he might have been Igbo from what he said in his book, but we don't know. And he was kidnapped into slavery as a child away from his family. We know he had a sister and was enslaved, first of all, in Virginia in America, and then in the Caribbean. And at the time, America was a British colony. So it was British slavery that he was forced into. And he worked really hard and managed. He wasn't a field hand, so he wasn't working cutting cane or in tobacco fields. He worked on ships. His owner was in the Navy, and he worked as sort of a valet, and then he worked as a sailor, and he worked in the British Navy. And he bought his freedom, and then still worked in the British Navy, and actually fought in the 7 Years' War, and fought in the Mediterranean, and then on the coast of Canada, off Nova Scotia. And he was involved later on in his life in an expedition to find the Northwest Passage, which was unsuccessful. But he lived in Britain. His later life was mostly in Britain. And all we know this because he wrote a best-selling book. He wrote his life story, and it was part of the campaign to try and get slavery abolished. He was one of the early, before Wilberforce, before Thomas Clarkson. He was one of influential African-born Britons who tried to get slavery banned. And obviously from the 1780s, 90s, it took 30 more years before it was banned. But his book was massively bestseller. It told his life from a child to adulthood. And I've based my book on what we know about him, which is mostly from this book. And it's a massively interesting life. Well, I think so. I think he is one of the Britons that we should all know about. He's a really important part of our nation's story, and everybody should know about him. What he tells us about his life, it's quite problematic, because although he always advocated that slavery was wrong and that enslaving people against their will was wrong, at one point in his life, once he was free, once he lived in London, he was persuaded by a man that he worked for, a white man that he worked for, that they could start up a plantation in Central America, in Honduras. It's very marshy. And Equiano would go along and be in charge of the enslaved people that he would need, that he would choose the good ones and that he would treat them well. So he was problematic, and he did want it to change. So that's what I like about history. You know, people say, oh, this is such a long time ago, but it's not. And it's not that many generations ago. If you think of the end of slavery in Britain, you know, which is not all our history. It's a part of our history, and it's a part of British history. It's a really important part of British history, I think, because this country, we all benefited from that free labour of all those kidnapped people. And it's something that we all should know about, and we all should be aware about. So I think one of the really important things to always be aware of is that it's not so long ago. It's only, like me, living, old, perhaps. My father, not living, he would be 106, I think, this year. But it's only me, my dad, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. It's only 5 generations away. My family were enslaved. It's only 5, it's not very long. Especially in the whole line of history, the whole of the Earth's history. It's like a blink. So I think it's important that we know the contribution that people like me and my family and a lot of our families had to make to this country, and how important it was, and the difference it made. And that we owe those people a massive debt. And that we owe people like Equiano, who is a difficult chap, but because he fought so hard to bring it to the attention of the wider society at the time, when at a time people in Britain weren't thinking about it because it was something that happened a long way away. So I think he's interesting. I think there's some interesting things in it, and the cover's lovely. So I hope you read it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you talk about it. I hope you think about it. And I hope you think about how we're all part of this. Is another side of British history. It's all our history. Thank you very much.